Good morning. Happy Shark and Ray Awareness Day. You guys have seen me on the streams a lot. My name is Anshika. I'm an ocean educator here at Birch Aquarium, and today I'm joined by my friend Delisa. Delisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name is Delisa. I am an ocean educator with Birch Aquarium. I've been on here a few times and I've talked about my job. Mostly it's interpretation, which is interpreting the science for the people.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited because I love sharks and rays.
Me too. Yeah, so we can kind of start talking about sharks and rays in general. So, Delisa, what do you know about sharks and rays?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question. I have personal experience with sharks and rays just by being out in the waters here in La Jolla. But I also have learned a lot from going to school about it. So I have some really great bio facts that I'm going to share with you all later on in the chat. And as we dive in, I can show you and we can talk about them and we can learn from them. But some of my favorite sharks and rays are our local ones. So our leopard sharks are always really exciting to see. I was just snorkeling in La Jolla 2 days ago, and I got to see 2 leopard sharks. So it was really, really exciting. Lots of rays as well. Lots of baby rays.
That's awesome.
Cute. Yeah.
And we can see leopard sharks and a few other shark species in our kelp exhibit, which you guys can see right here. So you can see in the top left corner, there's a leopard shark that just swam out of view. But keep your eyes peeled and see it's swimming right through the middle. So if you guys have any questions about sharks or rays today, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Anything you want to know. They're super fun. Anshika, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with sharks and rays?
Yeah, so I absolutely love sharks. It's been a joke that my name is actually Ansharka, because I've just been kind of in love with sharks since I was a kid. I've worked as an aquarist with sharks, and I've kind of taken care of a bunch of different sharks throughout my life. And I actually do research on the scales of sharks. So we'll talk a little bit more about the scales of sharks later. But essentially, they're tiny little scales called dermal denticles, which are skin teeth, and they cover the shark's body. And so that's why if you feel a shark one way, it feels smooth, but if you feel it the other way, it feels kind of rough. So I've done a lot of research on sharks, on their scales throughout my life, and it's really, really interesting stuff.
Cool. Good to know. Awesome.
Yeah.
So today is Sharks and Rays Awareness Day. Why do they lump them together? Like, why are they kind of one group?
That's a really good question, Delisa. So sharks and rays are both what we call cartilaginous fish. So cartilaginous fish, it might sound like a kind of a big word, but if you were to kind of touch your nose, the top of your nose or your earlobe, that is actually made of cartilage. So instead of having bones in their body, sharks and rays have cartilage, and that allows them to be a lot more flexible as they move around. So as you might see, our sharks in the exhibit, they can go one way and then switch to going the other way very, very quickly. And so they have a lot more flexibility in their body. And so that's kind of why they're lumped together, because they both don't have bones. They also don't have swim bladders, which is really interesting because other fish they have swim bladders to help them go up and down in the water. But sharks and rays are a little bit different, and instead they have kind of a fatty liver. And it's full of like oil that they can actually excrete into their body, and it helps them float a little bit.
That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Well, should we dive in?
I think so.
All right, cool. So why don't we start with the dermal denticles, which you were talking about earlier before that you did research on. That's definitely one of my favorite topics about sharks, just because it's so interesting and it's so cool how they fossilize. So yeah, do you want to talk about how somebody might study dermal denticles?
I would love to, Delisa. So basically what happens is these denticles are made out of dentine and enamel. So exactly the same stuff as teeth are made of. And what happens is they actually are super small, kind of very hard to see with the naked eye. And basically what happens is that they're used to help sharks and some rays swim faster through the water. So it basically cuts up the water and allows them to just move faster. That's why sharks can move pretty fast. Not all rays have denticles, but there are some that do. They're kind of more covered in like a mucus to help them kind of move through the water, but it's something that rays have a lot. And so what's really cool is the way that I study them is actually denticles, after a little while, they fall off the bodies of sharks, but different sharks have different types of denticles. So different sharks, like sharks that swim up in the water column, maybe like great whites, they have denticles that help them swim fast. And then animals that live on the bottom have denticles that are a little stronger to help protect themselves.
Yeah, I actually have a biofact. The first one that we'll talk about that I was able to pick up from the aquarium. So this is a shark skin, and I know it's kind of hard to see, and I don't think you'll be able to see the dermal denticles, but this is kind of what it looks like. And when I run my finger this way, it's smooth. When I run my finger this way, it's rough, and I reach a lot more attraction.
Yeah. Delisa, what are those big spots on the shark skin?
That's a really great question. So this is an epaulette shark. This is a really cool shark. So he has 2 false eye spots. They're supposed to look like eyes so that anything coming from behind it will think, oh, that's his eyes. He's facing me. It's kind of a confusing tactic to prevent itself from being eaten by its predators. And we can even see this, for example, on tigers too, which is really cool.
Yeah, a lot of animals have those kind of false eye spots to protect themselves. You might see some butterflies have them too. That's something that a lot of different animals have evolved to help them survive. Because other animals will not want to come close if they think the animal is a lot bigger.
Right? We have a question we'll start with Alan. Alan Pacheco wants to know, what is your favorite shark? And I already mentioned that mine has to be the leopard shark, just because my experience with them and how amazing they can be. But what's yours, Anshika?
I think my favorite shark is probably the swell shark, which we actually also have in this exhibit. They're really cool. They kind of like to stay near the bottom. The leopard sharks swim around a lot more, but swell sharks are really cool. And what's my favorite part about them is how they get their name. Delisa, do you know how they get their name?
I do. They're adorable. Baby swell sharks are my life, but basically when they get spooked, they swell up and they fill up their bodies with waters, and their little bellies get all puffy. They're like the puffer fish of sharks, which makes them super, super cute. And while we're on the topic of swell sharks, I actually have one of their swell sharks. This is a swell shark egg case. So when a swell shark has a babe, it'll be in this little egg case. So you'll see, and we have these at the aquarium in our nursery. There's a little yolk that lives inside of it, and then a little baby swell shark that'll feed on the yolk until it's ready to bite itself out. And what's really cool is that these little ties will connect to the kelp so that it doesn't fly away or float away.
Yeah, and what's really cool is baby swell sharks actually have some denticles that are a little bit bigger. And so what happens is they'll actually scratch, like they'll wriggle, and then they'll use those big tentacles to kind of push themselves out of the egg case, which is really
awesome.
Cool. So these end up, sometimes you might find some of these empty on the beach. And that's because the baby shark has gotten out and is living its life happily.
Yeah, they're really hard to spot though, because they look exactly like kelp.
Yeah,
they're the same color. Well. They're kind of like, they have these little filaments on them. All right, let's talk about another question we got, which is about my favorite shark. It's from Vanessa, and she's asking, she says, my son, Danny, would like to know how long leopard sharks get. So leopard sharks, on average, are going to be about 2 to 5 feet. But we can see them get up to 7 feet, which is pretty long. So they look pretty big and scary, but still, no matter what, their mouths they're teensy tiny. So they couldn't hurt you even if they tried. There's our little guy floating through the middle of the kelp exhibit. Another thing cool, I also have a biofact of a leopard shark jaw. So I'm just flashing everything right off the bat, but this is what their mouths look like. This is the mouth of a leopard shark. You can see all the little teensy tiny teeth. I think they're so cute. You can see those rows in there.
Yeah. what's really cool about leopard sharks is they actually like to they eat off the bottom. So because their mouths are kind of on the underside of their face, they can't really take big bites of anything. So they'll kind of more suck up like urchins or squid, things that like to live on the bottom of the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so their mouth is situated like down under their bodies like this.
Yeah.
Super cute.
So they're super cute. Yeah, they have
Love
super
them.
small mouths.
All right, so what were we talking about before we answered the question?
I think we were starting to talk about some local species.
Local species. All right, so we covered the swell. We talked about the leopard shark. Do you know of any others?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about some rays, because I know sharks get a lot of love. I feel like rays get a little less love in their life. So yeah. I think we can talk about some of the super common types of rays that we find right here off of San Diego. So one of the most common rays we find is definitely a bat ray. So we have those in our Shark Shores exhibit at Birch Aquarium. They kind of have a really big wingspan and kind of like flap through the water like a bat, which is really cool.
And they're also really dark on top, right? Those seem a little bit darker than the other kind of rays that I see in La Jolla shores.
Yeah. Delisa, I think you might have a little stuffed animal of a ray, right? Do you want to show people?
How did you know? Yes, I do. Yeah. So this is my Stingy. He is a spotted eagle ray. So this is what they look like. This is their shape. They're kind of triangular stinger. And this is the underside. So the same thing that she was talking about, or that you were talking about, Anshika, with the bat ray, they're kind of dark on the top and then really light on the bottom. Why is that?
So that's a really good question. I have my own shark that is also dark on the top and light on the bottom. It's something that's really common in the animal world. It's this technique called counter shading. So imagine if there's a shark swimming down at the bottom of the ocean and something is looking up or looking down from the top of the water. The bottom of the water is kind of dark, right? Because the sunlight's kind of is not as strong down there. So if something's looking down into the water, it looks dark. So the dark colors on the top of the sharks and the rays help them blend in very well. But on the opposite side, if a shark is swimming at the top of the water and something's looking up, the white color on the bottom helps them blend in again. So it's really useful for kind of both sides, and not just sharks and rays have it. A lot of different animals in the ocean have it, and it's definitely really cool and a great way to help them camouflage with their environment.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That was really cool. I like that we both have our little models. We both very clearly love sharks and rays. I have always personally loved rays. Rays have always been my favorite animal for sure. Okay, so Anshika, I wanted to bring up a question that we got from Laura Bird, and it says, is it possible to ID individual sharks, possibly using their dermal denticles? So I know that you participated in some research where you were sifting through the sand and picking out dermal denticles. Were you able to ID individual sharks, or was it more like a species thing?
So in terms of dermal denticles, that's kind of more, it's even hard to get down to species. I'd say it's really easy to get down to like family or genus, but they're not as individual as like a fingerprint. So you can tell what type of shark it came from. But there are other ways that scientists do identify individual sharks by tagging them or by taking samples, things like that. So it is possible. Sometimes scientists will actually, in an aquarium setting, they'll just use visual cues. So they'll see like maybe a certain spotting pattern of a leopard shark to identify which shark it is. So it's definitely possible. It's not super possible to identify, like, because with dermal denticles, you'll collect shed denticles that end up in the sand. So we can't be like, this one denticle is from shark A and then this one denticle is from shark B. It's more, okay, generally it's this type of shark that we're seeing.
Cool. I know you had mentioned the coloration on the tops of them. So for example, if you look at my little eagle ray, he has his very unique spots. And Leopard sharks have their unique spots, and so do whale sharks. So that's exactly how we would identify. And like you said, in the aquarium setting, when we're feeding the leopard sharks, we make sure that each individual gets fed by looking at their spots. And we know the patterns after having worked with them for so long. You get to know their patterns, and you get to know, okay, this one got fed, this one didn't, this one got fed. And it's the same thing for whale sharks too. So whale sharks have that really nice like spotted top that you can identify each individual with.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
all right.
One thing that I think a lot of rays have in common, I think in general, most rays, one thing is that they all have kind of a stinger, a barb on their tail. Why do you think, does anyone in the comments have any ideas why you think they'd have a barb?
So
yeah, go ahead.
A barb versus like just like a sharp point?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Why do you think?
So while people are trying to answer that question, we can kind of talk a little bit more about what comes out of that barb. Delisa, do you know?
Is it venom or is it poison? And what's the difference?
That's a really good question. So that's something that a lot of people get confused about, is the difference between venom and poison. So generally a good way to remember it is that poison has to be ingested. So you got to eat the poison, versus venom is injected. So venom is put into you, and like kind of like, I'd say venom is more put into you by force, and then poison is something that you would put into yourself potentially.
Right. Okay.
So one way I find is easy to remember that is like, if you see like a bottle with skull and crossbones, it doesn't say venom on it, it says poison. So it's the thing that would hurt you if they're ingested. Like if don't try this at home, but like if like poison spilled on your skin, it wouldn't be as bad. But don't do that. Yeah, so it's a great way to kind of tell the difference between poison and venom. So does anyone think they know what a stingray has? Is it poison or venom? Because they inject it.
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and guess that it's venom.
That's a good answer. That's right.
Cool. And then why is it a barb? Why can't they just do like a needle point?
So that's a really good question too. I would say that it's definitely a little bit like with a barb, it's a little bit harder to, in terms of like, because they'll only use it to they'll only use their barbs in self-defense, and that kind of, the barb helps it kind of stay in place.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes it harder to pull out, right? So
exactly.
It's like, being that it has that barb shape, it doesn't just go in like a pinpoint and then slip right out. It makes it so that the venom can stay in there and sting. And in a lot of cases, this can be really, really painful. And so we have to be aware of this when we're entering these habitats that have stingrays in them. For example, La Jolla Shores, right? So how do you like to stay safe when you're exploring these habitats?
Yeah, so one thing that I always like to do whenever I'm kind of going to the beach is always do what we call the Stingrays Shuffle. And basically what happens, it's not a dance move, although you could probably make it into a dance move. Basically, what you should do when you go into the ocean where stingrays are around, and it's a habitat where they live, they like the sandy bottom, is just as you walk, instead of stepping, you'll want to shuffle your feet. And so you kind of want to shuffle your feet like this. And what's really good about that is that it kind of sends vibrations through the water, and that allows stingrays to know that you're coming. Because if you were to just step, it might happen where you would accidentally, like, because the stingray won't know that you're coming if you step, and you might accidentally step on it. Obviously, it doesn't want to sting you, but if you step onto its barb, that might hurt. So it's always good to be cautious, and if you kind of move your feet like this, then there's no way you could step on top of a stingray, and it protects you and it protects all the stingrays in the ocean as well.
Definitely. I definitely want to highlight that they're more afraid of you than you are of them. So if they sense you coming, they're going to move right out of your way. You can even snorkel right above them and kind of watch them scurry through the sand. And they're gonna, for the most part, leave you alone. They really don't want to. I mean, it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress on an individual to have to protect itself to that extent. So for the most part, as long as you're letting them know, like, hey, I'm here, I'm exploring too, then they're like, all right, cool, I'll give you your space.
Yeah, they won't really come up to you. They're more, they're not really as curious about what you're doing, and they're not territorial at all. They're just like, let me leave you alone and go far away from you.
Right. They're just some good sea pancakes.
Definitely.
I actually have another really cool biofact on me. So I have the jaw of a bat ray. So if you look at this guy closely, it's really cool because their teeth are flat. They don't have like the spiky teeth that say the leopard shark or your other reef sharks do. They have these flat molars like teeth, right? And Anshika, do you know like what they like to eat? Like, why might it be beneficial for them to only have these flat molars that kind of roll?
Yeah, so they definitely like the invertebrates a lot more. So
right.
Their mouths are on the bottom of their faces as well, and so they kind of pick stuff up off the bottom. So they eat kind of like crabs or things that they'd have to kind of grind to open, not stuff that they'd have to chew. So they don't really eat fish because with those teeth, it's more of like a breaking through shells, crab, other small invertebrates with like snails and things with shells that they can just kind of get through.
Yeah, cool. I really like it too. I think it has a really cool design. Kind of looks like snakeskin.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. So let's see. What have we covered? So we've covered our dermal denticles. We've talked about some of our local species. Anshika, do you want to talk about the great white?
I love great whites so much.
Me
and
too.
I know you do too. So we can
I'm obsessed. So what is your favorite thing about the great white? Let's start there.
That's a hard question.
I know, right?
There's just so many awesome things about great whites. I think one of the coolest things is just how big they can get, because they're super big animals and they have like hundreds of teeth inside their mouths. And I know this great white looks kind of cute, and it's a lot smaller than real great whites. But,
just a little bit.
Yeah. They're definitely really, really cool. And I think one thing that's really interesting about great whites and other kind of pelagic sharks, so sharks that swim in the water column, is that they actually, a big myth is that sharks have to keep swimming to survive, that all sharks have to do that. But great whites are among the species that actually do. So other sharks have little holes on the top of their head called spiracles that help them swim through the water or help them breathe without having to swim through the water. But great whites, they kind of ram ventilate. So what that means is they have to keep swimming to push water over their gills in order to breathe.
And Anshika, so talking about the spiracles, are there also rays that have those too? Is that kind of why they can chill near the bottom of the seafloor?
Exactly. Yeah, I'd say I know most rays definitely have spiracles on the top of their head. Because they actually can fully bury themselves under the water, under the sand, and all that needs to be exposed are those little spiracles so they can breathe. So it's really cool. So even like our swell sharks and other bottom-dwelling sharks, they have those spiracles as well because that's how they can keep breathing without having to keep moving.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like in the aquarium, for example, people might be worried about this. So our swell sharks, last time I was in the aquarium, were kind of near the bottom right, and they just kind of chill there, like they hang out, and like they're okay. And a lot of times people, they are like sometimes guests will be like, "Hey, like this is like odd. Like why is it not moving? Is he okay? Is he breathing?" But like, yeah, this is what they like to do. They like to just kind of chill, and they're breathing perfectly fine. But okay, so the great white, the great white needs to swim, and they don't have a swim bladder. How do they maintain their buoyancy then? Because how do they not sink to the bottom?
Yeah, so all sharks and rays kind of have a really big liver that's full of kind of like a fatty oil inside, and oil does float, so it helps them kind of regulate their buoyancy in the water.
Right, yeah. The fatty livers of the great whites are some of my, I think they're some of the coolest things because a lot of people think of the great white as like the apex predator of the sea. They're big, they eat big things, and they have some vicious teeth. Actually, I have a jaw of a great white. Should I show you all right now? What do you think?
I think you should show us.
Should I whip it out? All right, cool. So just to let you know, the great white jaw, it cures a little bit differently. So it does kind of like have this funky shape that happens when it cures. But nonetheless, you can still see all of the rows of teeth that this great white has. So it's kind of insane. Like, look at that.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to see. But great whites are equipped with these really sharp teeth that I have to be really careful to touch myself. And they're also serrated on the side. So they're like baby knives. They're really, really sharp. And not to mention, this is huge. And let's compare it to, say, the leopard shark. This little guy. They're so cute. They couldn't even hurt you if they tried. But the great white could do some damage. But the good thing is that it's very, very rare for them to have any encounters with people in general. There's only about 30 attacks worldwide of great whites, and most of them are non-fatal. So they're usually just kind of like swimming, and they see a person, they're like, oh my gosh, that's a seal, that's my food. And then they take a bite, and then they're like, that's not my food, like abort mission. Let's try something else.
Yeah, they're definitely very curious, and
they're very curious.
They're like, that tasted really bad, and
yeah, they're like, that was gross. That was a person, not a seal.
Yeah.
So they don't really want to hurt you, honestly, and it's so rare that anything like that would happen. And when there is a shark attack, like, you will hear about it. So rest assured that it's super rare.
Yeah. And
I did.
Sorry. So we talk about great whites being these big apex predators, but is there anything that eats great whites?
That's a really, really great question. So we usually think of great whites as like those apex, like really like top of the food chain, gonna like kind of dominate the oceans. But there is another apex predator that makes the great white super, super scared. So I'm thinking about the Orca Whale. So the killer whale and the great whites have this incredible relationship that it always boggles me because like you said, like even in movies, you always see that the great whites are just like these really big, voracious predators. But when an orca swims around their waters for just a few hours, they'll flee their feeding grounds for up to a year. They won't come back.
Wow.
So yeah, so researchers in California actually will tag great whites, and there's a little island off of California where there's a good amount of pinnipeds, which are, your sea lion seals, and the great white sharks like to eat them, like to feed on them naturally, right? That's their food. Well, the great whites sense the orcas coming through, and they immediately flee. They just totally get out of the area, and that's because the orcas are like crazy predators. So they know that sharks have this really fatty liver, and what the orca will do is they'll puncture a hole in the great white shark and suck the liver out of the great white, and then let the rest just kind of die. And the great white sharks are horrified of this, and it's really cool because the orca just kind of runs everything. So yeah, that's like my favorite relationship.
That's really, really cool. It's really interesting to think of a shark that a lot of people and a lot of animals are kind of a little wary around has such an intense predator.
Right. Yeah. It's really cool. We even saw like one. We had a tag on a shark off of California, and this shark swam by another shark who had its liver ripped out by an orca, and it dove 50 meters deep and swam all the way to Hawaii for the rest of the year.
Wow.
So it really turns them into some scaredy cats.
Yeah. We have a question from Angelina, and she asked, do scientists know the lifespan of a great white? That's a really good question. So we actually, scientists believe that great whites will actually live 70 years or more. We're not completely sure on it, but that's generally what scientists believe.
Cool. Anshika, another thing too, I remember when you and I were whale watching, you pointed out this little red balloon that was moving suspiciously fast for a normal red balloon in the water. Do you want to talk about maybe what that was?
Oh, yes. So, because I love sharks so much, I actually did a shark research course in Florida for a bit, and we learned about ways that scientists will actually track sharks. So basically what happens is scientists will take a little buoy, put it in the water, super floaty buoy, and have a little line going down from it with a bit of bait at the bottom. And so basically what happens is the shark will smell that bait, get super excited, grab onto it, and then just keep swimming. And basically then what happens is that they're still holding on to the bait, and then the balloon the buoy at the top starts moving along the surface of the water because the shark was moving. So
right.
It's basically a little leash, and so scientists can kind of go and find that, can go and find what shark that is and go collect any samples that they need to on it just by watching that little buoy float around through the water at a quick speed.
Right. I think that's so cute.
Yeah.
I think sharks are adorable, even though I think some people think of them as kind of scary. I think they're really cool. And ultimately, what we should know is that they're not looking to bother anybody. They're just there to get their good food.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So feel free, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat about sharks, about rays, about this beautiful exhibit that we're watching, which is Birch Aquarium's Kelp Chem exhibit, and we're actually watching a live stream of that. So you might have seen some people walking in front. Those are our aquarists who are kind of just monitoring the exhibit and just figuring out what needs to get done and just how it looks. So this stream is actually up all the time, so you guys are more than welcome to watch it at any time if you just go to our website.
Yeah. One thing on Chica that I think we briefly covered, but maybe could talk about a little more, is the shark's sixth sense.
Yes, I can't believe we didn't.
I know, we kind of skipped over that. It's
so
like the coolest thing, right?
Yeah. So if you guys take a look at any sharks, you can sometimes see these little black dots around the side of their face. They're not pimples or not anything like that. Basically what they are these tiny little dots called ampullae of Lorenzini. It's a big, weird term, but essentially what they are these tiny jelly-filled pores that have, so there's these tiny jelly-filled pores that can actually sense electromagnetic frequencies in the water. So what's really, really cool is that these sharks and rays can actually sense the heartbeats of other animals that are hiding. They can find, even if they're swimming on up in the water column and they can't see anything, they can sense where animals are, and if they're hungry, they can go after them. And it's really, really cool because it's something that not a lot of animals really have.
Right. It's an electric thing. It's electricity. One thing that I actually did learn recently on Chica was another animal that has something kind of similar. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I think you're talking about the platypus, right?
Yes, I'm talking about the platypus.
Yeah.
They're really similar. So they have really similar as sharks. I don't know exactly how they work, but basically like how similar to the sharks, like they sense the difference in voltage. So they have, they know their voltage of their own pores, and then they sense the difference in that throughout their environment.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
It's super cool. And it's actually really interesting, like scientists have like studied this stuff, and they've seen that like sharks will actually, so metal actually gives off a tiny electromagnetic frequency, and so sometimes sharks will come in because they think it's food. They'll come bite like the propeller of a boat because they think that it's food. It's really interesting to see.
Oh gosh, sharks are so hilarious because they're so curious.
Definitely.
And they're just looking for a good snack.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to answer one more question. It is from Kiana, and she wants to know, do orcas have predators? So as far as we know, the orca is the apex predator of the open ocean. So we are not aware of anything that might be able to eat that. I imagine that when they're babies, they might be vulnerable to other bigger predators, but at the same time, they're going to roll in pods. So that means they're going to roll with their family, and they're going to be protected by the bigger ones. And they are pretty good predators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. They're kind of chilling in the world.
Yeah, they're the big dogs. I'd say, if anything, they're most vulnerable to humans, probably, and the kind of changes that we create in their habitats, and making it harder for them to live their lives. So, but at the same time, orcas are pretty tough to study as well.
Yeah, definitely. They dive pretty deep and can go pretty far on each breath. So, kind of hard to study an animal that you can't see very often.
Right. Whales are awesome. I love whales.
Whales and sharks, all animals. The ocean is just full of so many cool creatures. We could talk about
really
them for hours, and we do.
Day.
Come to the aquarium.
We really do. This is my favorite thing to do. I think I've showed you all of my biofacts, except for one. I have, last but not least, I just have a little swell, or a little horn shark egg case. It's shaped like a little, I don't know, screw.
Yeah. Do you know
we've talked about this?
Like a screw?
Yeah, actually, the mama will actually screw it down into the substrate, and to keep it safe.
Really cool. Yeah. So the mama will lay it, and pick it up, and then screw it into the ground so that nothing else will be able to get it.
Yeah. And same thing. These you can find like out on the beach too, once the little shark has found its way out. But these are from the aquarium because we have these horn sharks.
Yeah, because we get baby sharks that are born all the time.
Yeah. All right. Should we wrap this up on Chica?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. So thank you so much. It was so fun talking to you.
Yeah, I hope everyone got their questions answered. Yeah, this was a great time. I hope you guys have a happy Shark and Ray Awareness Day, and I hope you're now more aware of sharks and rays.
Yeah, and I hope you're a little bit more confident and comfortable going into the waters. As long as you let them know you're there, you should be just fine.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.